Hello, BookTube. As any of you will know, if you watch my channel, even if you're fairly new to my channel, I watch a lot of BookTube. I don't just make a lot of BookTube, I make a lot of BookTube. I make more BookTube than anybody. I make more BookTube than the next 5 people, but I also watch a lot of BookTube. When I have YouTube on, just in general, it's usually BookTube, far and wide, ranging everywhere. Channels that I don't like, typically, but I am interested in what they do. Channels that I like personally, but I'm not interested in what they do, and also channels that are right in the middle range there, the type of BookTube that I just love. I watch a ton of BookTube. And if you have watched my channel for a very long time, then you will know that once upon a time, I had a regular event that I did on this channel called Last Week in BookTube, where I would show you some of the fruits of all of that BookTube watching. I would bring stuff to your attention in case you missed it. Not a comprehensive list, but things that intrigued me. I would talk about them a little and leave links to them down below. And I would do that for BookTube. Then I would do broader YouTube, also with a few clicks, with a few hot links to the things that aren't BookTube, but that you might still find interesting. And I ran into trouble doing Last Week at BookTube. I revived it once very briefly, but the original run, I ran into trouble. I was a waif. I was a wavy-haired newcomer. I wasn't familiar with the incredibly toxic, acidic ways of YouTube. And how there are these vast crowds of people ready to pounce on anything. And I gave them plenty to pounce on. I made a dumb comment that got into a controversy and got me hashtagged and got me to be persona non grata for all the big UK booktubers to this day. To this day, there is some sort of stink associated with my channel that I think largely derives from that stupid controversy 6 years ago, rather than anything I do lately. I don't think a lot of the people who think, oh, know anything about my channel or anything, or certainly never contacted me personally. Those of you who have come here to Hyde Cottage to visit me and the Bean will know that I am quite nice. I'm not Saint incarnate. So I stopped Last Week in BookTube. I stopped doing it. Plus, even controversy notwithstanding, it still felt a little invidious to highlight some channels and not others, some videos and not others, when I was enjoying a lot more than I was highlighting, and I'm still on the fence about whether or not to revive Last Week in BookTube. A lot of you have told me over the years that you would like to see it, that you really enjoyed it. And that was also true of a lot of the booktubers that I mentioned in Last Week in BookTube. They liked hearing what I thought about their channel. They liked knowing that they weren't just shouting into the void, that sort of thing. I don't know if in 2023 I don't know if I will revive Last Week in BookTube, so I don't know what this video is. I have been watching BookTube recently. There are a whole bunch of things that jumped out at me, and I wanted to show them to you. Leave a link to them, tell you about them a little, and see if maybe you want to go and look at them. So I have a list here on the iPad mini that I thought we'd just go through. I don't know that this is Last Week in BookTube. It isn't. This is a few days in BookTube. So I don't know what I'll call it. I'll come up with something clickbaity. But the first thing that I want to show you, the first link that I want to leave, is something that I do want you to go and look, and also subscribe. Because I think it was touching on its own. It also touches on a deeper aspect of booktubing that booktubers do experience. This is a booktuber, Novella, who I think I've voxered with Novella, or messaged with her on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. Wonderful, wonderful channel. Row of books behind her. I admit, this is just a personal taste, but she does booktube the way I like, which is just to talk to me. No flashy edits, no flashy, cards or visuals of any kind, and no attempt to chase an algorithm. She just talks about what she's reading, what she's thinking about reading, and what she's thinking about it. And in this video, she does a video called Why is My BookTube Channel Struggling? Struggling, in this case, to find an audience, to find subscribers. I think when I watched her video, she had fewer than 100 subscribers. And considering how widely she's read, and how much fun she is to listen to, she's got a wonderful deadpan, self-deprecating humor, that mystifies me. I have gone on record many times saying that the process of how channels do or don't get subscribers is mystifying. Some of it is explicable. For instance, in the comments field of that video, Scott and Nell at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot mentioned that they also were struggling with their channel until a bigger channel noticed them and called them out, and that drove sort of establishment traffic to their channel. I imagine that happens a lot. That's one way to do it. A controversy would also be another way, but I don't advocate being hashtagged. Other than that, though, it's a mystery to me why some channels grow and others don't. I think there's a lot there that I don't understand. And Novella's channel is a perfect example. There you're getting the real deal. You're getting a seasoned reader who likes to read a lot of things that maybe you've never heard of, which is great, right? That's not a weakness to a channel. That's a strength to a channel. That's introducing you to new things, potentially new things. And she, in her video, she's not whining. Why isn't my channel doing better? She's legitimately asking. And some of the questions that she asked in that video, I can't help but think that a lot of you have also asked at some point or other. Is it my accent? Is it the kinds of books I choose? Is it the way I talk about them? Why is it that this just does not seem to be reaching more and more people? I think people who ask those kind of questions, I love listening to them. They're a little painful to listen to. I certainly don't want BookTube to be preying on the minds or the psyche of anyone who's trying to do it. That would make it unhealthy. But I think the people who ask those kinds of questions tend to be a little hard on themselves. Because I don't think it has much to do with how they do what they're doing. I think that's pretty obvious from how crappy some of the biggest BookTube channels are. It can't just be how you're doing what you're doing. It has to be, there's a mechanism involved in how YouTube lets people know about other videos that you don't have any control over. It doesn't matter how you do things. So I want to leave a link to her video, Why is my BookTube channel struggling? I think it's going to hit a really resonant note with all of you BookTubers out there, but maybe a lot of you BookTube watchers as well. And I'd like it if you subscribe to her. She's within a hair's breadth of 100 subscribers. Why not get her to 200 today? Give her a little jolt of this so that she knows I'm not her only fan. Although she did have fans, singing out in her comments field. That was very heartwarming to see. People saying, not only I watch your channel, but also, far more importantly, don't bend the knee. Do what you're doing. She says it herself. She smiles in her video and says, I don't expect much of what I'm doing to change. Good for you. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. And she got a lot of affirmation along those lines in the comments field. She could do with a little more. We could all do a little more. All of us introverts are so sensitive. Baby, stop with the licking. She gets into a zen pattern where she just keeps licking, whether it's herself or a sheet or whatever, and you just have to knock her out of it. Anyway, that's enough of Novella. No, she's really good. You should go and subscribe. You will like seeing her face show up in your subscription feed, which is the ultimate sign of whether or not a subscription to a channel is a good idea. Is if when you see them, you say, oh, good. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get to that video right away. You're not going to drop everything and do it. Some of you might have children. Against my advice. Some of you might. But it means if you're happy to see them, then that means it's a good subscription and a good channel. But the next one I want to mention is SirBookSage. And this is another example where he could do with 3 times the subscribers that he has. I do not understand the metrics here. I love his channel. He and I have a different... He also just speaks to the camera. And like a lot of BookTube channels that I really like, he does light edits. I am not. I have seen some sort of reputation as a doctrinaire hater of all edits of any kind. And that's not true. Obviously, I couldn't worship at the altar of Olive at a book Olive if I hated all edits of any kind, right? Any more than edits that cut out stuff that you don't want in there is very different from edits that are very noticeably jumping all around so that you get just the best bits. And SirBookSage does that. His videos, if he goes off on a ramble and doesn't want it in the finished video, he lightly edits it out. But even aside from that, we have different approaches. Is the nicest way that I could put it to myself. He's very, very smart, and he has a calming demeanor, a soothing voice, very inquiring, insightful mind. He's a big fan of epic fantasies. His favorite book, his favorite author is Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. But his channel touches on all kinds of epic fantasies. And one great aspect of the channel is that he will follow that epic fantasy to other mediums. It's not just books. And he's the type of person where when he sits down in front of the camera and starts talking about something, you want to hear what he has to say. You know you're not going to be offended or ticked off or irritated, as may happen on this channel. Instead, it's what does a soft-spoken deep thinker think about this subject? And the number one subject in the world right now for someone whose favorite author is Tolkien is The Rings of Power, coming out from Amazon in just a week. And he did a video, his latest video, I think it is about that. He's now seen all of the trailers. We've all seen all of the trailers. We have seen as much of The Rings of Power as we are going to see before the first episode airs. And like so many Tolkien fans out there, there are whole channels devoted to Tolkien. So many Tolkien fans out there, aside from the studio paid shills who will scream at anything out of excitement, and who were exposed when it comes to Rings of Power. The show haters, the neck-bearded quasi-fascist alt-right guys on YouTube who hate anything they call woke. Their channels are fun to watch because they yell and scream about things they don't care about. None of them knew anything about She-Ra, for instance. They still made 10 videos apiece. But they exposed the producers of the Rings of Power for creating these fake fan, fake enthusiasm promotional videos. Their exposés were very funny, very mean, but very funny. Leaving them aside, the true believer Tolkien channels, and there are a bunch of them out there, and a bunch of booktubers who are true believers of Tolkien. I am myself. He's one of my favorite authors. Have become increasingly worried the more they have seen about the Rings of Power. They all wanted to believe in it. But if you're not bought and paid for as a shill by a studio, you're going to start to worry about this show. Men of the West, nerd of the, what is it called? There are all sorts of geeky Tolkien channels that are all wonderful. And they've all started to very publicly worry about whether or not the show is going to be a travesty of everything that they love. And in this video, SirBookSage has seen all of the Rings of Power trailers that we're going to see, and he expresses in his very kind way ambivalence on what he has seen so far. And he breaks it down into 3 categories. It's really interesting. There's the category of made-up characters doing made-up things. The Rings of Power is based only on the appendices to the Lord of the Rings. It's not based on the Silmarillion, and it's not based on the Lord of the Rings. The showrunners for the Rings of Power don't have the right to use those things. If it's not in the appendices of the Lord of the Rings, they can't touch it. And needless to say, the appendices of the Lord of the Rings, although they're very long and very detailed, don't cover a lot. There's a lot that is missing there. So it's a lot of open territory. Even the most diehard Tolkien fan did not expect that the Rings of Power would have no made-up characters. Made up in the sense here being made up by someone other than Tolkien. I know they're all made up, but made up by someone other, invented characters that aren't in the Legendarium. Even the most diehard Tolkien fan knew that the show would have those, but increasingly it's become pretty obvious that we're going to get long stretches of made-up characters doing made-up things. SirBookSage makes the good point that that could still be good. That will depend entirely on the writing and the show running. It won't be what Tolkien fans want, but it could still be good. It could still be entertaining. But category 2 is Tolkien characters made-up Tolkien characters doing Tolkien things. So we know quite a bit, even from those appendices. We know quite a bit of what some marquee characters do in the Second Age. Whether it's, Sauron as Anatar, the Lord of Gifts, or any of the people in Numenor, or whatever, we know there are things that are in there. I would argue, I don't know what SirBookSage would say on the subject, I would argue that there's enough in those appendices so you don't need any made-up characters. But I might be wrong about that. But category 2 is Tolkien characters doing Tolkien things. And then category 3 is the one where the show is going to run into trouble. Lots of trouble. As you can tell right from the title of SirBookSage's video, which is Galadriel in Numenor? With a question mark. Because Galadriel never went to Numenor. And yet, in the trailers. Anyway, the third category is Tolkien characters doing made-up things. Which is really tricky. That is a really, really tricky thing to do for fans. And if the point that I want to make to the showrunners of Rings of Power is if you don't please the fans with this show, it's going to fail. There isn't enough of an audience that cares about this otherwise. And they would respond probably by lifting their heads from their coat-covered coffee tables and saying, well, what about all the fans of the movies? We'll get them. And I would say, they're not asking me, but I would say the movies made those people into Tolkien fans, not movie fans, not Peter Jackson fans. The movies made those people into Tolkien fans. Those people then went and read and memorized the books, the appendices, the Legendarium, the Silmarillion, the Unfinished Tales, all of it. So there's no separate category here. If you do have Tolkien characters doing made-up things and you do it wrong, you'll be offending everyone. I don't expect that, as bad as the Rings of Power might get, I don't expect that it will pry an expletive from SirBookSage, unless it's in Elvish. But I wanted to leave a link to his video so you can see pretty much the most even-handed analysis of where we stand right now before that show hits. Then who else have we got here for me to pick on? Oh, well, there's some old cronies of mine. Tom at Tom LA Books. You all know him anyway, but I want to make sure you know. If you know him, you almost certainly know him because he did a landmark in BookTube in YouTube, I would say. A future resource that who knows how many thousands of people will use. He did a canto-by-canto walkthrough of Divine Comedy by Dante. With readings, he does a very good fake Italian accent. He did readings, and he did comparisons of translations and all sorts of meta-commentary. And he did it all the way through the Commedia. That is utterly amazing. And it didn't kill him. He still has the energy to do it again. So he has started, to my utter delight, Ariosto's Orlando Furioso, which is not known the way the Commedia is known at all. It is great. It's much longer than the Commedia, and it is wonderful. It's a wonderful Italian epic of the Renaissance. And he is going to do it just as slowly, I think, roughly just as slowly as he did the Divine Comedy. That is amazing. Absolutely amazing. He has done Canto number 1. Canto number 1 is a fairly slight thing, but it's full of allusions to the epic that Ariosto is sort of lampooning and continuing, Orlando Innamorato, by a different author. So you need that. You need one video at the beginning to do that, and he does that for Canto number 1. So I want to leave a link to that. It'll be fascinating to see what he does with the Orlando Furioso, because he loves the poem, and he's discovering as he reads it how strange it is. It's stranger than he remembers from the last time he read it. But he's not making any pretense of the fact that Ariosto is not his favorite author. Dante is his favorite author. Just bar none. Unless maybe it's God. If it's not God, then it's Dante. And Dante is his favorite author, and that added an element to his walkthrough of the Divine Comedy. That element won't be there for his walkthrough of Orlando Furioso, and that will make it more interesting, not less. See what he does when he's not dealing with an author that he knows backwards and forwards, that he knows better than anybody on BookTube, I would argue better than a lot of people anywhere. That element won't be there for Orlando Furioso, but it is still fascinating. And when we're talking about that element plays into the next thing I want to recommend, another old crony. I think our mothers were sisters. That is Jason Harrigan, the West Coast of Ireland, who has decided, he's on and off BookTube all the time. He's a temperamental teenage girl when it comes to the constancy of his channel. But he has decided in 2023 to give YouTube, BookTube, all of us a pure gift. And that is to walk through his own favorite author, Umberto Eco. Eco wrote a short shelf of books, and Jason just recently did an announcement video. That'll be the thing I link here. To Ecofiction 2023, as Jason put it, it's going to confuse the greenies. People who follow that hashtag looking for global warming videos are not going to get it. Instead, because you've got an Irishman talking about his favorite author, you're going to get a lot of hot air, which is just what you don't want for global warming. Jason is going to walk through the works of his favorite author, talk about them in detail, analyze them, probably have guests on. Unbelievable. What a gift it is for somebody to do that. It's what Tom did. Tom walked us through his favorite author. He didn't do the Vita Nuova, but he did the major work by his favorite author. And now Jason's going to do that. And it made me, I have to confess, I'll be talking about this in detail some other time, it made me want a whole bunch of people to do that. Imagine how wonderful that would be if 2023 is the year where a whole bunch of booktubers did a patient year-long walkthrough of their favorite authors. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what that would be? Systematic, not bouncing around, but systematically do that. The good and the bad stuff and all of the history involved. No matter what you think of the author, wouldn't you line up if Michael K. Vaughan told you that he was going to do that for Robert E. Howard in 2023? Wouldn't you line up to do that? Sean D. Standfast has already announced that he's going to do that for Clifford Seamack, the science fiction author Clifford Seamack. It's a large body of work. Not a lot of it is well known to science fiction fans, and nobody knows it better than Sean. Wouldn't it be great if lots of booktubers, not all booktubers have favorite authors, but what if the ones who did chose 2023 as a year to do that? Oh my God. But anyway, Jason is going to do that. And occasionally when Jason gets going, he can make a video that's, 12 minutes, even 15 minutes. So you'll have a lot to watch. And then the last thing I want to talk about here, and whatever this video is, I don't know what this video is. You can tell me if you want more of this. The last thing I want to talk about is sort of a rondelay, a subject that went the rounds, or maybe just got batted between two sides of a tennis court. And that was about why people read. It's kind of central to BookTube, kind of central to what we're doing here. Why do we read? And it started with a video by Mark at Book Time with Elvis, who did a video with an intentionally clickbaity title. called Women Authors and Why I Avoid Them, which is a perfect way to get yourself canceled. And like I said at the beginning of this video, I don't advise being hashtagged. It's really unpleasant. Of course, the video wasn't why Mark avoids female authors. It was more than that. It was why he reads, what he gets out of reading, and what he goes into it for. Utterly fascinating. And Aaron Facer decided to make a response video about why he reads. And it was also really, really thought-provoking, really, really good. It's true that with Aaron Facer, you have to get used to the nonstop profanities and the belching, the yelling. But if you can get used to that, then he did that. And then Mark at Book Time with Elvis did a response video. Now, off in the distance, over the hedges, just out of sight, was BookTube's cranky old man, Sean Standfast, who also did a video on it. He did a kind of response on that, too. But the main ones that I want to link to are the ones that dug into the subject of why we read. I was very tempted to make a response video myself, but that would be pretty unendurable, I would think. Especially since I've already made it clear on this channel that if it's not for school or work, the ultimate overriding reason why you should read is for fun. The only clarifying point I would make about that, and I'm sure that everybody on this list would echo it, is that there's all kinds of fun, right? I mean, if you look at the abstruseness of Foucault's Pendulum by Umberto Eco, there are plenty of people who would look at that and say, well, no matter what this is, it can't possibly be fun. Jason finds it fun, and he will convince you. Michael K. Vaughan just recently did a video, or mentioned a couple of times, Thucydides. He finds reading Thucydides fun. So do I. It doesn't look like fun on the surface. There are all kinds of fun, is what I'm saying. The point isn't you'll do some reading for fun and then some reading that's quote-unquote serious. It's that you should broaden where you find your fun. But that is part of this three-part discussion. So I'll leave these videos down below of why I read. It was sort of a multi-voice discussion. For all I know, it could go on. More people could make response videos. But that is it. Those are some links that I will leave down below. I don't know what this is. It's not last week in BookTube. It's not. There are no subheadings or major headings. It's not a whole week. It's just a few days. But I wanted to make sure that you knew about all of these things, starting with Novella, who I want to stress again, even though she made a video called Why is My BookTube Channel Struggling? But she is not whining in that video. She's literally asking, what is it that makes a channel grow or not grow? Utterly fascinating stuff. So go and subscribe. I will post this, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.